You've seen them. Maybe you are one of them. The person who spends $7 on a coffee but swears it's about supporting local artisans. The one who reads classic literature on their iPad and believes their marketing job is fundamentally creative. The person who buys a rugged, expensive SUV not for off-roading, but for navigating the perfectly paved streets of their gentrified neighborhood. You might call them a hipster. You might call them a yuppie, but you'd be wrong. For the last several decades, a new elite has been silently shaping your world, from your politics to the price of your apartment. They're the Bobos, the bourgeois bohemians, and their story of how the 1960s counterculture married 1980s ambition is the secret blueprint of power in the 21st century. So who are these Bobos? The term, coined by Brooks, mashes up bourgeois and bohemian to describe a new upper class that doesn't play by the old rules. This isn't your grandfather's country club establishment, nor is it the flashy, status-crazed yuppie of the 80s. The Bobo is a hybrid. They're the successful doctors, lawyers, programmers, and media execs who manage to blend the rebellious artistic spirit of the 1960s with the ambition and drive of the 1980s. The core of the Bobo identity is a giant paradox. As Brooks puts it, this is an elite that has been raised to oppose elites. They have plenty of money, but they're deeply suspicious of materialism. They might spend their lives selling things, but they live in constant fear of selling out. They are by nature anti-establishment, yet they've become the new establishment. This creates a fascinating and often funny set of cultural rules. Bobos don't do conspicuous consumption. They practice conscientious consumption. They'll spend a fortune, but it has to be justified by something other than raw wealth. That $10,000 reclaimed wood dining table isn't a luxury item, it's a nod to craftsmanship and authenticity. That professional-grade oven isn't for show, it's a tool for their passion for artisanal cooking. It's a clever way to be an affluent success and a free-spirit rebel, all at once, and to make sure everyone knows it. This balancing act, this merger of two warring cultural ideals, wasn't an accident. It was born from two very different and very loud parents. To get the Bobo, you have to understand the cultural civil war they came from. Think of their family tree as having two branches, each one defined by rejecting the other. First, you've got the Bohemian parent, born out of the 1960s counterculture. This was the world of hippies and beatniks, a world that ran on rebellion against the establishment. The highest ideals were authenticity, spiritual seeking, and a deep-seated hatred of materialism. Success wasn't about climbing the corporate ladder, it was about dropping out of the rat race completely. Bohemians defined themselves against the polite, predictable life of the bourgeoisie. They were all about raw experience, and they saw chasing wealth as a sign of a corrupted soul. But then came the backlash. The second parent is the bourgeois of the early 80s, best personified by the yuppie, the young urban professional. If the hippies wanted to drop out, the yuppies wanted nothing more than to opt in and win. This was the decade of raw ambition, meritocracy, and materialism without apologies. A BMW, a Rolex, a corner office. These weren't just things, they were merit badges, proof that you had made it. The yuppie embraced the very system the bohemian had rejected. And for a while, it looked like these two value systems would be enemies forever. The culture war between the free-spirited artist and the ambitious professional defined a generation. So, what happened? How did these two sworn enemies create an air that would take over modern culture? The answer isn't a truce, but a synthesis. This grand merger didn't happen because one side gave up. It happened because the world changed. The dawn of the information age created a new economy where ideas, knowledge, and creativity were suddenly as valuable as financial capital. This was the perfect breeding ground for a new kind of elite. See, the children of the 60s rebels didn't all drop out. They went to college, and in the following decades, a new meritocracy based on education began to take over. The path to the top was no longer just through the old money establishment, it was through elite universities and professional degrees. The best and brightest were now defined by brain power, and they started filling the upper ranks of society. But they brought their bohemian values with them. They wanted success, but they couldn't stand the idea of being the organization man their parents fought. They wanted wealth, but they were disgusted by the shallow materialism of yuppies. They performed a brilliant bit of cultural jujitsu. This new elite created a code that allowed them to spend huge sums of money without feeling guilty. Consumption was no longer about status, it was about self-expression and ethics. Buying organic food wasn't an indulgence, it was a commitment to health and the environment. Supporting artisanal makers wasn't just shopping, it was an ethical choice. This new class found a way to have their liberal ideals and their immense financial success too. They figured out how to be anti-establishment and the establishment at the same time. And in doing so, they created the cultural operating system for the 21st century. Once you learn to spot the Bobo blueprint, you see it everywhere. Their blend of values has become the default setting for the modern elite, shaping everything from our cities to our companies. Look at the modern creative workplace, especially in tech. The casual dress codes, the campus-like offices with free snacks, the mission statements about changing the world. This is pure Bobo. It's an environment engineered to make highly ambitious, highly paid work feel like a rebellious creative project instead of a boring corporate job. It perfectly merges the bohemian desire for meaning with the bourgeois drive for success. Look at our cities. The process of gentrification is the Bobo ethos written on a map. It's a cycle often started by people moving into urban neighborhoods looking for authenticity and community, only to end up displacing the very cultures that created that vibe. The result? Neighborhoods filled with organic markets, yoga studios, and independent-looking coffee shops that are actually markers of a new affluent class. Even their spiritual and political lives are a hybrid. Brooks points out that Bobos often practice a flexible orthodoxy. They might identify with a traditional religion, but feel free to pick and choose the parts that fit their modern values, avoiding strict rules. Politically, they often search for a third way, blending socially liberal ideas with economic pragmatism. They are the moderate, college-educated voters who shape debates on everything from climate policy to campus politics. But this cultural dominance hasn't been unchallenged. For years, a quiet resentment has been growing against the Bobos' perceived hypocrisy. The rise of populism across the globe can be seen as a direct backlash against this new elite, a revolt by those who feel left behind or looked down on by a class that speaks a totally different cultural language. What one person calls ethical consumption, another sees as pretentious and overpriced. What one sees as thoughtful moderation, another sees as out-of-touch elitism. The Bobo meritocracy, once seen as progress, is now criticized by many for creating new social divides. The story of the Bobo is the story of a culture that wants to have it all: the artistic freedom of the 60s and the financial success of the 80s, the soul of a poet and the bank account of an executive. They are the product of a grand compromise, a class that ended the culture war by simply absorbing both sides. So let's ask the question again. Are you a secret Bobo? Do you find yourself justifying expensive purchases by talking about quality, authenticity, or ethics? Is your career a careful balancing act between making a living and pursuing a passion? Do you curate your life, from the books you read to the food you eat,
as a form of self-expression. Hey, no judgment here. David Brooks himself admits he's a Bobo. For all their contradictions, this is a class that genuinely values education, creativity, and social awareness. But their story exposes a core tension in modern life. In the quest to merge rebellion with success, did the Bobos create a more enlightened form of capitalism, or just build a more comfortable, better branded cage? Did they solve the paradox of being both a rebel and a ruler, or just get really good at living with it? If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to understand more of the hidden codes shaping our world, consider subscribing for more deep dives into culture and society.